Um, Game. Apologies to future viewers. Having some issues with ATS. God. What are we doing? Oh, here's the problem. Let's try this. No. Nope. Oh, yes. All right. One moment here. Oh, that's different. Cool. All right. I play with a paddle because I don't have a steering wheel. Alrighty, let's see here. Let's go pick up a job. My glasses on. Still saving up for my own truck. I haven't played this since last summer, so. Ooh. What's this Tesla job? Hopefully it's not like the one last night where I had a double trailer. What is this? High value cargo. Peterbilt sleeper. I'm already in Yuma. Yeah, let's do this job. Sweet. Last night I took a job where I didn't realize it. I was pulling some of those like FedEx shorties trailers. Oh my god, that was a nightmare. I mean, it was fine until I got to Yuma. And then I wasn't paying any attention when I got to my destination and got into a okay. I got in and got into a spot where I couldn't back out to go back to get the parking option. It was awful. Alright, how about some music? I can never remember how to turn the radio on. Oh wait, that's not it. For some reason I have to go in here. Whoops. Gonna listen to some public radio, y'all.
RI, Public Radio International.
This is WUNC FM HD1 91.5 Chapel Hill.
Bringing the world home to you, this is North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. I'm Will Michaels.
Right.
Support comes from Kenan Fellows Program for Teacher Leadership, awarding fellowships to K-12 educators from across North Carolina with the support of its partners. Details, KenanFellows.org. And Triangle Community Foundation, dedicated to building a thriving Triangle through work with donors to encourage community development, regional arts, environmental conservation, and youth literacy. Donor information, trianglecf.org. And healing acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine, ancient therapy for modern ailments, providing natural therapies for a variety of women's health conditions located in Midtown. HealingAcupuncture18.com. This is North Carolina Public Radio. It's 4 o'clock. President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen's finances are under more scrutiny. It was revealed this week that two major corporations hired him for insight into the administration. For Friday, May 11th, I'm Will Michaels. This is All Things Considered from North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. AT&T and Novartis have apologized for hiring Cohen. We'll get the latest developments. More women in Pakistan are fighting for their rights despite ongoing risks to them and their families. We'll visit Jerusalem after another tense week in the region.
Trump is not going to change the reality of Jerusalem. The reality of Jerusalem will be changed by its people.
And the coffee shop Joe Van Gogh cuts ties with Duke University after a complaint over rap music led to 2 employees being fired. Plus, the weekend politics after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Shannon Van Sant. President Trump says he is standing by his embattled EPA Administrator, Scott Pruitt. NPR's Aisha Rasco has more from the White House.
At a White House meeting with automakers, President Trump was asked whether he still has confidence in Pruitt as leader of the EPA. His answer was brief.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Pruitt was in the room at the time. He's currently facing nearly a dozen investigations into his ethics and his spending of public money. He has maintained he has done nothing wrong, but some lawmakers have called for him to resign. Pruitt was at this White House meeting because he will play a pivotal role in carrying out the administration's policies on vehicle fuel efficiency standards. Aisha Rasco, NPR News, the White House.
A White House aide's comment on Senator John McCain is prompting criticism from McCain's family. Special Assistant to the President, Kelly Sadler, reportedly dismissed McCain's opposition to Gina Haspel's nomination to be CIA director. Sadler said McCain's opposition did not matter because, quote, he was dying anyway. This morning on ABC's The View, Meghan McCain, his daughter, spoke about her family's struggle with the 81-year-old senator's aggressive brain cancer.
Since my dad has been diagnosed it's almost a year, July 19th, I really feel like I understand the meaning of life. And it is not how you die, it is how you live.
Right.
And
President Trump is considering several potential nominees to lead the Departments of Veteran Affairs. NPR's Will Lawrence reports among them is a decorated Army veteran in Congress.
Representative Brian Mast told NPR he's honored to be under consideration to serve his fellow veterans at the highest level. Mast is a first-term Republican. He defused bombs for the Army in Afghanistan until he lost both legs to a landmine. Mast has set up an office within the VA back in his Florida district, but at 37, he's got little experience running large organizations. The VA has over 360,000 staff. The White House is also reportedly considering former Florida Congressman Jeff Miller, who led the House Veterans Affairs Committee, as well as 2 well-known executives from healthcare networks. The VA is rated as good or better than private healthcare in most states, but it has struggled with chronic staff shortages and scandals. This will be the 4th VA secretary in 4 years. Will Lawrence, NPR News.
France is condemning the U.S. move to reimpose sanctions on companies trading with Iran, calling the decision unacceptable. The action follows Trump's decision to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. The U.S. says firms have 6 months to stop trade with Iran. Since the nuclear deal was signed in 2015, several French firms signed billion-dollar trade agreements with Iran, including Airbus and the French oil giant Total. France's foreign minister says U.S. actions on Iran are already impacting rising oil costs and increasing political uncertainty. This is NPR News.
It's 4:04. Good afternoon, I'm Will Michaels. This is news from North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. Investigators in Morrisville are searching for a man who fled while jurors were deliberating in his trial for alleged child sex crimes. Sean Walters was arrested in 2017 on 14 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. After jury deliberations started, Walters requested to go to the bathroom and never returned to the courtroom. Federal authorities are working with local police to find him. The coffee shop Joe Van Gogh has cut all ties with Duke University. In a statement today, owner Robbie Roberts said he was doing so to, quote, preserve Joe Van Gogh's brand independence without conditions. Earlier this week, IndieWeek reported a Duke University administrator complained about a rap song being played in the coffee shop on campus. It eventually led to 2 Joe Van Gogh employees being fired. Roberts says those 2 employees and the others who worked on Duke's campus have been offered new positions at other stores. It's a big weekend for college baseball in the Triangle as all 3 nationally ranked teams jockey for position leading into the Atlantic Coast Conference tournament in a few weeks. Dave DeWitt reports.
UNC Chapel Hill and Duke are ranked number 3 and 9 in the nation, respectively. The Tar Heels and Blue Devils meet in the opener of a 3-game series tonight at the Durham Bulls Athletic Park. If Carolina can win 2 of 3, it will clinch the Coastal Division title. In Raleigh, NC State is still hoping to win the Atlantic Division. The 7th-ranked Wolfpack hosts Wake Forest this weekend. NC State trails Clemson by a single game in the division, with 6 games left on the regular season schedule. The ACC baseball tournament is later this month in Durham. Dave DeWitt, North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
Mostly sunny this afternoon, then partly cloudy tonight with lows in the mid-60s. More sunshine tomorrow with a slight chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms. Highs in the low 90s in central North Carolina, the mid-80s along the Outer Banks. Mostly sunny on Sunday with highs ranging from the mid-80s to low 90s. This is North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. Support comes from Little Passports, where every month kids can explore a new country when packages arrive in the mail filled with activities, souvenirs, maps, and stickers. Learn more at littlepassports.com/radio. And Our American Story, a digital student contest for grades 8 through 12 exploring democracy, diversity, and opportunity through examination of American historical events. AmericanEvolution2019.com/Our American Story.
On a Friday, it's All Things Considered. From NPR News, I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Audie Cornish. The finances of a new figure in the Russia investigation are being carefully scrutinized this week. Michael Cohen, who is President Trump's longtime personal attorney and fixer, is attracting attention for lucrative consulting deals with companies like AT&T and the Swiss drug maker Novartis. Today, the chief executive of AT&T said his company made a big mistake paying Cohen $600,000 for consultant work. The company had hoped for advice on the new Trump administration, and at the time, AT&T was planning a merger with Time Warner. It was last month that the FBI raided Cohen's office and hotel room, seizing documents and records using a search warrant based on a referral from the Mueller team. Now, to talk about why all this matters and how it plays into the scrutiny of Cohen, we have Jim Zaroli. Hey there, Jim.
Hi.
So let's start with AT&T. What are they saying about their connection with Cohen?
Well, the chief executive, Randall Stephenson, sent out an internal memo today, which NPR obtained. He said hiring Cohen was a big mistake. He said, our company has been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and our reputation has been damaged. I mean, big blue chip companies like AT&T just hate getting in the middle of controversies like this. It really hurts their image. And AT&T also said its head of lobbying, Bob Quinn, was stepping down. Didn't give a reason, but the timing certainly suggests he was pushed out because of this controversy.
We talked about Cohen being the president's fixer. How else does he make a living? What more have we learned about his finances?
Well, Cohen has been involved in all kinds of businesses. As a lawyer, he's helped set up medical billing companies, an acupuncture office, even an offshore casino. The New York Times reported that for a while he owned a small part of a catering hall that was said to be used by mobsters. He's done a lot of business with Ukrainian and Russian investors. Now, he's never been accused of any crimes himself, but a lot of people he's done business with have been. His father-in-law, for instance, got in trouble over his taxes. A lot of these businesses that Cohen is involved in are privately held, so we don't know much about them. But one business we do know that he's involved with is the taxi business, and we know about that because the record suggests he's actually in a bit of financial trouble there.
And that's a big deal for New Yorkers, right? As the taxi business is facing a lot of competition there from Uber and Lyft. What do we know about Cohen's investments?
Well, he and his wife own more than 30 medallions. Medallions are these real plaques that are attached to cabs to let them operate in New York City. And because of the rise of Uber and Lyft, the business is hurting. I recently spoke with Robert Familant of the Progressive Credit Union, which loans a lot of monies to taxis. He says medallions have really dropped in value.
Currently, if you want to buy a New York City taxi medallion, you can probably get one for about $180,000 in cash. That's down from a high of over $1 million.
And there's evidence that Cohen's taxi businesses are in some trouble. His companies owe a lot of money in back taxes. In New York, CNN estimated $282,000. In Chicago, some of his medallions have been suspended because the insurance on them wasn't paid.
In the end, what does it matter, the shape of Michael Cohen's finances?
Well, it matters because, investigators from the U.S. Attorney's Office have taken a lot of Cohen's financial records, and he's a new figure in the Russia investigation. He's been very close to President Trump. He knows a lot about his business dealings. So if federal officials find some kind of wrongdoing by Cohen, he could be under pressure to cooperate with the investigation by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and that could potentially mean big trouble for President Trump.
That's NPR's Jim Zarroli. Jim, thank you.
You're welcome.
And let's stay right here with Michael Cohen's complicated finances to kick off our regular politics check-in. This week we are joined by Karen Tumulty, columnist for The Washington Post. Welcome.
Great to be here.
And also Eric Erickson of the website The Resurgent. Hey there, Eric.
Thanks very much for having me.
Karen, I'm going to start with you. Your column on Cohen this week describes him as the Swiss Army knife of political fixers, meaning what?
Well, he's sort of an all-purpose guy that people seem to want around for whatever the situation. Michael Cohen, to the degree anybody knew who he was before Donald Trump was elected, it was primarily for his very awkward appearances on cable television. Since then, his name has popped up as the lawyer who made the spectacularly unsuccessful effort to silence a porn star who claims that she had an affair with Donald Trump.
Stormy Daniels is definitely not keeping quiet.
That's right. But what we have discovered this week is how many different businesses and how many different industries suddenly decided that Michael Cohen, a lawyer who has a taxi business on the side, had invaluable advice for them. Novartis, the big drug company, said that they needed his advice on healthcare policy. AT&T hired him even though he does not have any telecom expertise that we know of. And a Korean aircraft company hired him because they said they wanted him to help out with their accounting systems.
And he's not an accountant.
None of these things. Right. The fact is that what he has to offer and what he was selling himself to these companies as is somebody who understands Donald Trump. And the question is whether he was also selling access to Donald Trump or people around him.
Eric, let me bring you in here. If he was, and we'll keep it as an if, but if someone were to be peddling access in exchange for money, that would hardly be a new phenomenon that came to Washington with the Trump administration.
Right. It's K Street in Washington. And what's so interesting here is that he didn't actually move to Washington. And yet did this. Now, this happens all over Washington, D.C. Senate and congressional staffers, particularly for leadership, they go off into the private sector as lobbyists and claim they can get access back. There are actually rules in place to keep former members of Congress from lobbying on certain issues for a number of time using their influence. This is what Washington has. What makes this so interesting is twofold in my mind. One, this is a president who claimed he was going to drain the swamp, and this is the swamp. But two, it doesn't appear that Cohen really actually was able to exercise any influence. And as a side note to that, a lot of these companies, no one expected Donald Trump to win. I don't even think Donald Trump expected to win. And so these companies were caught flat-footed with no connections to the president, who famously was refusing to hire any Republican at all who had criticized him. So they needed someone. And here comes Michael Cohen pledging to be able to give them access.
Karen, if the thing that is raising eyebrows for a lot of people is all of these companies paying Cohen for expertise in areas in which he does not appear to actually have any expertise, is the key question then whether any of this is illegal or just unseemly?
That is the question, and there are, again, we don't know the answers to this. We do not know precisely why the FBI raided his home, his hotel room, and his office. Where he might have run afoul with laws and regulations might have been, for instance, if he was doing actual lobbying work and did not report himself as a lobbyist. A lot of these payments from these companies went into the same corporation that he created to handle the payments from Stormy Daniels. So
Essentials Consulting. Yes.
What a perfect name, huh? And so there's a question of whether there might have been some fraudulent statements made with regard to the finances of that company. The fact is, we just don't know what the FBI was looking for or what the U.S. Attorney is looking for.
Let me turn you both to foreign policy, where the president had a big week. He announced it's full steam ahead for this June 12th summit in Singapore with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. And then on Tuesday, he pulled the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal. Here is what he had to say on that.
The Iran deal is defective at its core. If we do nothing, we know exactly what will happen. In just a short period of time, the world's leading state sponsor of terror will be on the cusp of acquiring the world's most dangerous weapons.
Eric Erickson, you wrote a piece this week headlined, President Trump's foreign policy is winning so far. How so, as you see it?
Well, he has made good strides in North Korea, and with the Iran deal, I agree with him walking away from the Iran deal, which I always thought was a bad agreement. That being said, we're still early in the administration. I do think it's worth noting that one of the reasons the president feels so emboldened to do these things, like withdraw from the Iran deal or pressuring North Korea as he has over the last year, is because so many people told him repeatedly not to do these things, like withdraw from the Paris Accord or move the embassy into Jerusalem or whatnot, that bad things would immediately happen, and nothing ever did. So now he feels even more emboldened to do these things, which is one reason I think, for example, on tariffs, he's also proceeding, and I'm waving my hand saying, no, bad for the economy, but he's not listening to anyone because the people who told him these things would blow up in his face rather quickly were proven wrong.
Karen, what do you think? Foreign policy for President Trump, is it winning?
I think that the president believes that the same strategy that has seen him make some progress with North Korea, this idea of maximum pressure, may be what works with Iran. The question here is that what is he going to replace the Iran deal with? The fact is it did have some shortcomings, and one of them is that it didn't succeed in sort of its idealistic goal, which was to make Iran a better actor in the region. Also, a lot of these restrictions were not permanent ones. But now that the president has pulled out the United States unilaterally from the deal, to the great anguish of the Europeans, the Russians are still in the deal. That is the problem. Where's the leverage?
Where's the leverage? Eric, quick last word to you. How does all this fit into the America First foreign policy that the president promised?
He wants a very robust one. The conservatives who supported Donald Trump believed that Barack Obama treated the United States as just one of 200 equal nations, and they wanted it to be the preeminent nation charging in the world without actually going into nation building, I might add. And they see the president doing this, a very strong American foreign policy, pressuring other countries.
All right, that is Eric Erickson of The Resurgent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Karen Tumulty of The Washington Post, and that wraps up our weekly political chat. Thanks to you both.
Thanks a lot.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
President Trump said today he wants to lower prescription drug prices by encouraging more competition. We'll get a report in 15 minutes on WUNC. Support comes from North Carolina Botanical Gardens Native Plant Sale and Festival, tomorrow 2 to 7 p.m., offering native plants, environmental groups, family activities, and music. ncbg.unc.edu. And Carey's Booth Amphitheater presenting 2018 Hobnob Jazz Series. Wednesday, May 16th, it's Mint Julep Band in concert. More information online at boothamphitheater.com.
President Trump's hard line bring North Korea to the table. Will that strategy work on Iran now that the U.S. has left the nuclear deal? Draft lyric for West Side Story that didn't work.
It's a sound like in church when they're praying. It kind of went thud.
Saturday, a weekend edition from NPR News.
That's tomorrow morning starting at 8. We also get support from the Esiola Lodge at Linville Golf Club, featuring a Donald Ross Championship golf course, fly fishing, and a full-service spa and fitness facility located off the Blue Ridge Parkway. Information, esiola.com. The spring fundraiser ended with more than 3,500 listeners contributing to WUNC. Your support is so appreciated for helping keep WUNC fiscally sound. Thank you. Mostly sunny this afternoon, then partly cloudy tonight with lows in the mid-60s. It's 87 in the Triangle, 91 in Fayetteville, 88 in the Triad, and 78 along the Outer Banks at 420.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Stars, presenting the new Stars original series Vida, following the Hernandez sisters as they return home to East LA and learn the surprising truth about their mother. Vida is available now on the Stars app. From Centrify, working to stop breaches with zero trust and security through next-gen access, a combination that includes single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and privileged access management. Learn more at centrify.com. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Audie Cornish. Next week, the new U.S. Embassy to Israel opens in Jerusalem. It's a controversial move because the city's status is disputed. Palestinians also have claims there. President Trump says his administration is recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people, and Israeli leaders are celebrating the move. But Israeli citizens actually have mixed feelings about the city and its religious character, as NPR's Daniel Estrin reports from Jerusalem.
A short walk from what will be the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem is an apartment building on a leafy street. On the first floor, a religious Jewish Israeli man has moved in with his family. On the second floor, a secular Jewish Israeli woman has moved out.
I always said I was born in Jerusalem, I'll die in Jerusalem, and I'll be buried in Jerusalem. This was a saying I used to say always. I don't see myself now going back.
Daphna Elon lights a cigarette in her new apartment in the coastal city of Tel Aviv. She was the sixth generation of her family to live in Jerusalem, and she's nostalgic for the old Jerusalem of the 90s, when her son would play with a Palestinian kid from a nearby neighborhood.
He was riding on the donkey and my kid was on his bike, and they switched, and my kid went on the donkey and he took his bike. And they were friends and everything was nice, and you wouldn't see that anymore. There's no communication, there's no relationship. I don't know, everything went to an extreme, and I don't like the tension, so I ran away.
She lived through waves of Palestinian suicide bombings, and she felt alienated by the growth of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, which closes off some public roads on the Sabbath.
If I want to go to my mother's on Shabbat, I cannot take the same route I take during the week, because half the roads are closed on Shabbat.
Her son and more than a dozen of his friends growing up have moved to Tel Aviv, Israel's business hub. Today, more than half of Israeli Jews in Jerusalem identify as religiously observant or ultra-Orthodox. And about 40% of the city is Palestinian.
So we have the Arabs and we have the religious, and we're being somehow pushed out. Slowly but surely we feel unwanted, unwelcome, and everything.
On the bottom floor of the old Jerusalem apartment building she left, Shaike Elami hums a Sabbath tune and prepares Sabbath dinner. He's part of a small community of progressive Orthodox synagogues. He's in love with Jerusalem, a city that's central in Jewish tradition, that his great-great-grandparents in Eastern Europe prayed about.
They all dream of Jerusalem. I have the ability to be part of Jerusalem, building the community in Jerusalem.
You're living the dream.
I'm living the dream. I have a mission. It's not just a dream, it's a mission.
He directs community centers in Jerusalem and is involved in projects to encourage Palestinians and Israelis to mingle. He also tries to create common ground between Orthodox and non-religious Jews. Both Elami and Elon see Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, even though Palestinians disagree. But they say President Trump's endorsement of the Israeli view isn't what the city needs most.
You know, it's not really bothering me. I can live without his declaration. I'm very concerned that we have any ability today to make any process with the Palestinians.
Trump is not going to change the reality of Jerusalem. The reality of Jerusalem will be changed by its people. And if it is not being changed intentionally, it will not change for the better.
What they long for is a more livable city where everyone feels welcome. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Jerusalem.
There's a part of Pakistan that was once ruled by the Taliban, the Swat Valley. During those years of Taliban rule, it was deadly for girls to study, but some persisted, some even making it through law school to fight for women's rights, sometimes at their own peril. NPR's Dia Hadid reports.
I'm standing outside the courts here with the lawyer. Her name is Mehnaz Naz. When this scene unfolds, a woman in a brown burqa hovers near the entrance. She's holding her son's hand and she clutches a slip of paper. She shows it to a court guard, who immediately walks over to Mehnaz. She's the only female lawyer here. Mehnaz is also distinctively dressed in a white headscarf and face veil over long white clothes. Over that, her black lawyer's robe. The guard asks Mehnaz, "Are you free?" And the woman, Nurshad Begum, explains her problem.
My husband married another woman and he abandoned me. I have 5 children. He doesn't bother to ask about us.
Begum says when she complained to the police, the officer wrote down Mehnaz's name. He said Mehnaz would help.
I often fight cases free of cost for poor people. This woman can't afford to pay for a lawyer.
Minutes later, the guard stops Mehnaz again. He directs her to a woman holding a baby. She's crying. They chat, and then Mehnaz tells me,
she wants justice and her rights. I want women to have rights like men.
Mehnaz says this happens all the time. She's a criminal lawyer, but she's taken on hundreds of these kinds of cases for free. It's important work in SWAT, where there's around 500 male lawyers, but only 12 female lawyers. Mehnaz says she risked her life to be here. She decided to become a lawyer as a teenager after she saw her female relatives get cheated out of their inheritance. But she says she couldn't study in her hometown because the Taliban took over. They shut down the girls' school, and Mehnaz had to flee to her aunt's house in a town still under government control. She began studying law, but the violence followed her, and in 2009, clashes erupted around her aunt's house.
I did my exams under very difficult circumstances. There was curfew, clashes, and I was afraid of the Taliban too, that they might kill me for getting an education. They also threatened my parents.
Her father insisted, despite the threats, that she continue. Within a few months, the army pushed the Taliban out of SWAT. Mehnaz finished her studies and a couple of years later began practicing law. She says her first days were hard.
People found it strange. They'd say, why has she joined a male profession? They said, why isn't she a teacher? Why doesn't she get a job that suits a woman?
Even going to the lawyer's cafeteria for the first time was terrifying. She says there were no women there at all. And even though the Taliban were defeated, this was now 2012, their insurgents were still threatening women who studied or worked, like Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate. A Taliban insurgent shot her in the head because she was advocating for girls' education. During that period, Mehnaz says threats against her family continue.
My father was threatening. He was threatening through letters, mobile phones, sometimes through the post. They were terrible years for me.
Those years are over now. There's no more threats. Mehnaz says her male colleagues respect her and they appreciate her work. Now Mehnaz has taken on another challenge. She's joined a movement demanding rights for her ethnic minority, the Pashtuns. A few days after we meet, she sends me a photo of herself at a small protest.
Holy cow.
She's the only woman in the photo. She holds a sign and she stands in the front row. Dear Hadid, NPR News, Swat Valley.
This is NPR News.
NASA announced the discovery of an Earth-like planet in 2015, but now some researchers say it's not clear that planet actually exists. We'll have a report in 15 minutes on WUNC.
The U.S. Embassy in Israel is moving to Jerusalem, and we will have the latest on the embassy's opening. That's on Monday's Morning Edition.
Start your day with WUNC. Support comes from Doctors Making House Calls, 95 primary care clinicians dedicated to helping complex patients avoid unnecessary ER visits and hospitalizations. Positions available throughout North Carolina. Information, doctorsmakinghousecalls.com. And NC Green Power, promoting cleaner energy and education for North Carolina's children through their Solar Schools Grant Program. ncgreenpower.org. And the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University celebrating basketball season with an exhibit of vibrant color photographs by Bill Bamberger, capturing the different settings in which basketball is played. nasher.duke.edu/courtside. Partly cloudy skies tonight with lows in the mid-60s, more sunshine tomorrow. Highs in the low 90s in central North Carolina, the mid-80s along the coast. It's 89 in the Triangle, 91 in Fayetteville, 88 in the Triad, and 78 along the Outer Banks at 4:30.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. The Environmental Protection Agency says it will now consider the economic impact of clean air standards. As NPR's Jennifer Ludden reports, it's a major shift for a policy that for decades is focused on protecting public health.
In a memo, Scott Pruitt, the head of the EPA, says this change is about protecting the environment while also helping the economy. But critics say it violates the Clean Air Act. They also point to a 2001 Supreme Court ruling that said the EPA cannot consider the cost of implementation when it sets clean air standards.
NPR's Jennifer Ludden. The announcement sets the stage for major changes and legal battles over how the government enforces its law to curb air pollution. The agency says it's calling for a back-to-basics approach to regulating pollution from vehicles, businesses, and other sources. The EPA chief says the overhaul is designed to give states and local governments more say in environmental decisions. The daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is calling for people to boycott Waffle House after recent police altercations at the restaurant chain. Waffle House says their review of the two most recent incidents does not indicate race was an issue. Ross Terrell from member station WABE reports.
Bernice King called for people to stay out of Waffle House, at least until the Atlanta-based restaurant chain has a serious, quote, discussion on racism. Video from the latest incident at a Waffle House in North Carolina showed a white police officer choking and throwing down a black man in prom attire. About 2 weeks ago, a controversial video showed 3 white police officers arresting a black woman in a Waffle House in Alabama. Her breasts were exposed during the process. For NPR News, I'm Ross Terrell in Atlanta.
Stocks finished mixed on Wall Street as healthcare shares gained, but tech stocks fell after software security firm Symantec reported an internal investigation could delay its annual report. You're listening to NPR News.
It's 4:33. Good afternoon, I'm Will Michaels. This is news from North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. The state Supreme Court will not set aside a ruling against an environmental advocacy group. The court said NC Warren unlawfully acted as a public utility by selling solar power to a church in Greensboro. The court heard oral arguments last month and issued its ruling today. The group installed solar panels on a church roof and sold electricity to the church at rates that were below those set by utility monopoly Duke Energy. 2 people face felony charges after law enforcement found 10 animals starved to death on a farm. 38-year-old Joey Gray Moser and 46-year-old Kimberly Dawn Moser were indicted for the deaths of 9 alpacas and 1 goat in Forsyth County. Campbell Law School held its commencement ceremony in Raleigh today, and as Rusty Jacobs reports, the featured speaker was an embattled official with the U.S. Justice Department.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein cited the words of the nation's forefathers in his speech. The Harvard Law School graduate quoted John Adams in reminding the new lawyers that facts are stubborn things.
Pursuing truth means always yielding to the facts, even if they run counter to our hopes.
Rosenstein also quoted Thomas Jefferson advising the graduates to swim with the current on matters of style, but to stand like a rock on matters of principle. Rosenstein is overseeing the investigation of possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. He's come under frequent attacks by the president. Rusty Jacobs, North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
Expect major traffic challenges this weekend in the Triangle as all of the major universities and many of the smaller schools hold commencement ceremonies. NC Central and NC State universities hold their main events tomorrow, as do William Peace University, Meredith College, and Campbell. UNC Chapel Hill and Duke graduations are Sunday. RDU Airport says it will rival Thanksgiving weekend for the number of travelers coming through the gates. The airport expects a record 133,000 people will pass through the facility through Monday, with the busiest time between 4 and 7 a.m. on Monday. Sunny this afternoon, then partly cloudy tonight with lows in the mid-60s. Some more sunshine tomorrow. There is a slight chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms. Highs in the low 90s in central North Carolina, the mid-80s along the coast. You're listening to North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Zoom. Zoom offers cloud video conferencing, online meetings, and a video conference room solution in one platform, featuring digital video and audio with screen sharing, account registration, and more at zoom.us. And from the financial services firm of Raymond James, offering personalized wealth management advice and banking and capital markets expertise, along with a legacy of putting clients' financial well-being first. Learn more at raymondjames.com.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Audie Cornish.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. Today, President Trump laid out his plan to deal with the high and still rising prices of prescription drugs. He called it the most sweeping proposal in history, and he promised people will see results soon.
We will have tougher negotiation, more competition, and much lower prices at the pharmacy counter, and it'll start to take effect very soon.
The president spoke in the Rose Garden, and as he spoke, the Department of Health and Human Services released what it is calling a blueprint for lowering drug costs, a blueprint that NPR health policy correspondent Allison Kojak has been poring over, and she's here now to tell us all about what's in it. Hey, Allison.
Hey, Mary Louise.
So what's in the plan?
So the president called it sweeping, and he's right. It touches on everything from the drug approval process, the patent system, the incentives that drive the drug prices higher, and even how Medicare works and foreign trade. And it tries to lower prices for individuals, but also addresses the overall cost of prescriptions to the whole system, to the economy. Mm-hmm. But a lot of what's laid out are just ideas, and they're good or bad ideas, but they're ideas. They're not concrete proposals. They're things the administration wants to study or ask for feedback on.
Are there any concrete proposals in here? I mean, are there specific ideas for how they're going to lower the drug prices?
There are a few. There's a lot of very wonky ones that are like how Medicare pays for things. But there's like one specific one that would allow senior citizens on Medicare to get their generic drugs for free. And so that would cut costs to the senior citizens, but also to the system because they would be more likely to buy the generic drug. Mm-hmm. There's one more that would require drug companies and all those ads we see on TV advertising drugs, they would have to actually include the price, which might drive them to sort of say, oh, maybe we shouldn't give $1,000 a pill for this drug. So the idea there is to, shame them, I guess, into lowering their prices.
And meanwhile, drug ads get even longer on television with more disclosures.
Yeah. And then there's a bunch of proposals that are aimed at middlemen in the pharmaceutical industry, and the president really seemed to have his sights on them. And here's what he said.
We're very much eliminating the middlemen. The middlemen became very, very rich. Right? Whoever those middlemen were, and a lot of people never even figured it out, they're rich. They won't be so rich anymore.
All right, Alison Kojak, help us figure out who these middlemen were and what exactly the Trump administration wants to do to make them less so?
Yeah, so they're like what are called pharmacy benefit managers. These are the people like Express Script or CVS Caremark that implement your pharmacy program for your insurance company or your employer. But a lot of people say they play both sides. They negotiate rebates, and then they take a share of it. So it's in their interest to see drug prices higher. So what Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar said after the president's speech was they want to eliminate the whole rebate system. And that would really change how drug prices are, or how drugs are sold across the country.
You're telling me a lot about what the administration wants to do, what the administration might do. How likely that all of this is going to come to pass, and how soon?
So some of this stuff was in the president's budget, and they need Congress to pass it. So it's unclear what will happen there. And a lot of these, like I said, they're asking for information. And Secretary Azar said many of these ideas may take many years to implement.
NPR's Alison Kojak, thanks so much.
Thanks, Mary Louise.
President Trump faces no shortage of legal challenges, none bigger, of course, than special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. To help manage the administration's response to the Russia probe, Trump has hired Emmett Flood. He's a prominent Washington lawyer with a sterling reputation and a resume that already includes work for 2 presidents. NPR's Ryan Lucas has more.
Those who have worked with Emmett Flood describe him as cerebral, scholarly, and cool under fire. A lawyer who would be just as comfortable writing a brief for a Supreme Court case as he would be making arguments in a bare-knuckle courtroom trial.
Emmett's a pretty low-key guy. He's not a table pounder.
That's Scott Kofina. He worked with Flood as a White House lawyer in the George W. Bush administration.
He's not flamboyant. He's very thoughtful, effective in a low-key manner, not boisterous, not arrogant, but very firm.
That low-key approach stands in contrast to the president's other new lawyer, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who has turned heads with a series of eyebrow-raising interviews with the media. Flood, in contrast, has kept his head down. He has made no media appearances since joining Trump's stable of lawyers last week. He did not respond to an interview request from NPR. Instead, he's been meeting with other members of Trump's legal team to get up to speed. That under-the-radar approach comes as no surprise to Glenn Donat, who worked with Flood on President Bill Clinton's legal team during Clinton's impeachment.
I don't think you'll see Emmett taking any kind of a role in the press and trying to litigate this through press appearances and tweets and public statements.
Flood's focus, Donat says, boils down to this.
Emmett is a lawyer's lawyer who does his work either behind the scenes or in a court of law.
Still, Flood's addition likely signals a more aggressive stance from the White House in its relationship with the Mueller investigation, particularly over executive privilege. A man who has had first-hand experience butting heads with Flood over White House prerogatives is Elliot Mintzberg.
He was a fierce defender of executive privilege and prerogative.
Mintzberg served as chief oversight counsel for the House Judiciary Committee when the panel was investigating the Bush administration's firing of U.S. attorneys. He says Flood dug in his heels and was unwilling to compromise on handing over certain executive materials the committee had voted to obtain, which is partly why he says Flood is a good hire for Team Trump.
I think it was a smart move, frankly, for the White House to add someone like Emmett Flood, and I think it suggests that the White House appears to now be in a mood to fight.
Former colleagues say that Flood's views on presidential privilege and prerogatives are rooted in his past White House work. Flood was one of the key architects of the legal defense to the articles of impeachment against Clinton during the investigation of independent counsel Kenneth Starr. That experience also helped fuel his skepticism of special prosecutors with a wide-ranging mandate. Again, Donat.
Those of us who represented President Clinton became very sensitive to prosecutorial overreach, to the unique dangers presented by an independent counsel, roving jurisdiction, and through partisan exercises that looked like efforts by the opposing party to try to replace the president that was popularly elected.
President Trump and his allies, of course, have frequently accused special counsel Robert Mueller of roving far beyond his mandate in the Russia investigation. Giuliani says Flood's role in the White House will be to act as counsel to the presidency as an institution rather than as an attorney to the president himself. Still, the job is not risk-free. One big asterisk, of course, is President Trump's well-documented habit of ignoring legal advice. That concern wasn't enough to deter Flood. Those who know him say he's a believer in public service, and they also acknowledge the attraction and challenge of working on a job with stakes as big as they come. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
On Weekend Edition tomorrow, NPR's Scott Simon talks to David Nevin, the lead lawyer for 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Nevin says his client believes he has something to contribute to America's renewed debate on torture. You can listen to that story tomorrow. Ask your smart speaker to play NPR or your local station by name.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Why?
Ever since astronomers started to detect planets beyond our solar system, they've been trying to find another world just like Earth. A few years ago, they announced that they'd found a planet that was the closest match yet.
25.
NPR's Nell Greenfield-Boyce reports that scientists have now taken a new look at this discovery and say it may not be what it seemed.
It was the summer of 2015, and NASA held a press conference. Its Kepler Space Telescope had detected a new planet named Kepler 452b, and it was big news.
The space agency says it has found what it's calling Earth's cousin, the most similar planet to our own they've ever found.
TV shows and newspapers ran artist depictions of the alien world, and NPR weighed in, of course.
It orbits in the so-called Goldilocks zone, where liquid water and possibly life could exist.
This was the first near-Earth-sized planet orbiting in the habitable zone around a star very similar to our sun. What could be finer? Trouble is, now some astronomers say it's not possible to know for sure that this planet actually exists.
There's new information that we can now quantify, which tells us something that we didn't know before.
Fergal Malali used to be an astronomer on the Kepler team. He says the original science wasn't shoddy. It's just that researchers have learned more about the telescope's imperfections.
And I kind of hate saying that because Kepler was an absolutely wonderful instrument. It was exquisite in the quality of the data it could detect, but nothing is perfect.
Kepler stared at stars for years, looking for telltale dips in brightness that meant a planet was passing in front of a star and blocking some of its light. Not every drop in brightness came from a planet, though. Scientists already knew to look for false alarms caused by things like two stars going around each other. But increasingly, researchers have learned that other random stuff was happening. Maybe a star's brightness naturally varied, or maybe the telescope got hit by a piece of dust. And sometimes this random stuff happened in just the right pattern to mimic an orbiting planet. So, Malali and some colleagues decided to go back and take another look at 452b.
We've told people there's a planet there. How confident are we actually that there's a planet there now that we're aware of this other noise source and can sort of characterize it?
The answer is they're not super confident. What are the chances that this planet is real?
I would say it's higher than 50% and less than 90%. That's my gut feeling on it.
For a bona fide confirmed planet, astronomers like to see more like 99% certainty. So this is rather awkward. Chris Burke of MIT was on the research team.
You sort of don't want to be the person to deliver bad news, but sometimes the bad news is the truth of it.
He says there's still hope. They're not saying a planet definitely isn't there, and there's other ways to look for it.
One possibility that we're looking into is using bigger telescopes, so like the Hubble Space Telescope. Could it be used to independently verify Kepler 452b?
Even if it can never be verified, don't be too sad.
You can't hear about all of them in the population, but there's tons of awesome other planets out there.
Like Kepler 442b, another world that could be rocky and have temperatures cozy enough for life. It orbits a star a little cooler than our sun, so it's not exactly Earth-like. But Burke says that discovery is still reliably confirmed. Nell Greenfield-Boyce, NPR News.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met with his South Korean counterpart following the return of 3 Americans from North Korea. We'll get the latest in 20 minutes on WUNC. Support comes from Funny Girl Farm. Summer farm stand CSA spaces available. Tomatoes, basil, and mozzarella at the Mount Moriah Irwin Road roundabout between Durham and Chapel Hill. FunnyGirlFarm.com. And the Original Mattress Factory with 9 locations serving the Triangle, Burlington, and Fayetteville, offering locally manufactured mattresses and delivery directly to their customers. OriginalMattress.com.
When Jimmy O. Yang first came to the U.S. from Hong Kong, he couldn't even figure out basic phrases like, "What's up?"
I just looked up in the sky. Like, what are you talking about?
So Jimmy mastered English by watching black entertainment television.
I just thought that's how everybody talked. So I went up to the lunch lady the next day. I'm like, "Hey, what it do, shawty?" Yeah.
Jimmy O. Yang from HBO's Silicon Valley. Next time on It's Been a Minute from NPR.
That's tomorrow afternoon at 4.
Marty in Flagstaff.
We also get support from the Clayton Cultural Arts Foundation and the Clayton Center, presenting David Miles and his new release, Real Love, Thursday, May 17th at 8 p.m. Information online, theclaytoncenter.com. Partly cloudy skies tonight with lows in the mid-60s. More sunshine tomorrow. There is a slight chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms. Highs in the low 90s in central North Carolina, the mid-80s along the coast. It's 89 in the Triangle, 91 in Fayetteville, 88 in the Triad, and 78 along the Outer Banks at 450.
This is All Things Considered from North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. I'm Rusty Jacobs, and it's time for a look back at the week in state politics. Joining me are Rob Schofield, Executive Director of the Progressive NC Policy Watch, and Becky Gray, Senior Vice President with the conservative John Locke Foundation. Happy Friday.
Thanks, same to you.
Rusty.
North Carolina held primary elections this week. The 9th Congressional District was the site of one of the biggest upsets. Incumbent Robert Pittenger lost a close race to his challenger Mark Harris, the former pastor who lost to Pittenger by 134 votes 2 years ago. Becky, what was your reaction to the outcome?
I was a little bit surprised. We knew it was going to be a close race. Some of the indications I was getting before Tuesday indicated that Robert Pittenger, the incumbent, did have the advantage. The thing that I think is really interesting is that this really elevates that congressional race to, I think, the very top concern nationally. So we're going to be getting a lot of attention on this. Mark Harris, in some of his remarks after the election, said statistics and running those numbers are one thing, but really understanding sort of the heart and soul of that district is something else. He feels pretty confident that he will be successful, but first of all, a little bit of a surprise in the outcome, but the big deal is it's now going to get a lot of national attention.
Rob, Democrat Dan McCready easily won his 9th District primary and will face Harris with a lot more cash on hand at this point.
Right.
So are Democrats right to consider, as Becky may have suggested, that the 9th is a flippable district?
Oh, I think they're doing cartwheels. I think they're very excited that Reverend Harris is the opponent. They see him as an ultra-conservative preacher as opposed to sort of just a veteran politician like Pittenger was. McCready, I thought it was interesting that McCready actually got more votes in the Democratic primary than the 2 Republican candidates combined. Now, there were probably some other local issues that played into that, local sheriff's races and things like that, but it's still, in a supposedly conservative Republican district, it's pretty striking that he did so well. This is a very attractive, young, up-and-coming politician who's got solar farms and he's a Marine Corps combat vet. I mean, it's hard to draw up someone from Central Casting more impressive for a young candidate. And in contrast, Reverend Harris is not that. He's a conservative preacher, and that's not traditionally who we think of sending to Washington on behalf of our constituents. So anyway, should be a fascinating race. I think you should be prepared for lots of TV ads and lots of money spent on the media markets in the coming months.
And lots of money from outside sources. Absolutely.
Yes.
Turning to Wednesday, legislators returning to Raleigh for the short session, primarily to make adjustments to the biennial budget. Though they'll be greeted by angry teachers planning protests for higher pay, more spending on education, GOP leaders held a telephone press conference Monday to hail a fourth consecutive revenue surplus. They said lawmakers were working hard to get a budget agreement in place before the July start of the fiscal year. In other words, a truly short session. Rob, do you think Republican policies should be credited with the revenue projections?
I don't think credit's the right word. I mean, clearly we have a surplus because of the policies that have been enacted, but the surplus is that's what happens when you systematically disinvest in public schools, you starve education, you starve environmental protection, you starve the prisons, you starve the courts. Oh, what a surprise, you have a little bit more money left over. But of course, we have given massive tax breaks to people at the top. Sure, you're going to have a surplus as a result of that. It's not it's a drop in the bucket as to what is needed in terms of spending the services and structures. And so they'll tout this as a quote-unquote surplus, but it's not going to make any difference in terms of really rescuing those services and so badly. That's not what we're using.
Becky, the governor has his own budget priorities. Do you think we'll see some special miraculous reconciliation between him and legislative leaders?
Probably not. They just are on polar opposite ends of the role of government, the size and scope of government, how you approach state budgeting. I thought it was really interesting this year, this budget cycle, that the Republican leadership in the budget negotiations, the first thing they did is they set the amount of money that they're going to spend. That's what they established first. What we've seen in past, what we've already seen from Roy Cooper is the wish list. I'm going to spend $130 million for this. I'm going to spend $5 million for this. I'm going to spend $10 million for this. What on the other end of it is setting the amount of money that can be spent that we can afford based on revenue numbers. This isn't something they just pulled out of the hat. Actually, the amount of money that they have set is 3.8% increase over last year. So, more people are moving to North Carolina. We have more kids in the classroom. We have more people on the road. There's a growth in the government that is tied to the growth in population. But it's reasonable. Just like in our family budgets, when you're making that out, you don't sit down and start with the list of everything you'd like to have. You start with the amount of money that you've got coming in, and then you set your priorities from there.
In the weeks and months leading up to this short session, lawmakers have been discussing school safety. There have been committee meetings on environmental quality issues. Rob, what other issues do you think the short session will accomplish besides the budget?
Well, it would be nice if we would talk about some of those issues. The legislative leaders are saying we're only going to be here for a couple of weeks. They've basically purporting anyway to have already negotiated out the budget without any public input, without any process. Beforehand, they're just going to present it, signed, sealed, and delivered, presumably the first day or the first week of the session. So it's anybody's guess. I mean, at one point we were hearing very serious talk that lawmakers, legislative leaders anyway, wanted to push through some constitutional amendments to put on the ballot that would make some fundamental changes to North Carolina law in November. So, that's the way they play things under the current leadership regime in Raleigh. They keep things close to the vest. They don't share much with the public. They're not about public process or open government or open debate. It's all about springing things at the last minute. I fully expect that there'll be some things we hadn't anticipated and that will be rolled out and be expected to pass in a day or two. And unfortunately, that's just the way things have been run in Raleigh these days. I hope there is a continued backlash to that from amongst the public. They're going to say, hey, let's talk about what our needs are. What are our actual needs in education and the environment? Not having some artificial cap on the budget placed there just because some powerful legislators decided a few years ago we got to give billions of dollars of tax cuts to the wealthy and the people who don't need it.
Becky, do you foresee any other legislative accomplishments beyond budget adjustments?
Well, and a lot of things we already know. Yeah, a lot of things we already know. Don't forget that, the process we have in North Carolina is that during the long session, a 2-year budget is drawn up. So we have a budget in place for this year. It's already been voted on, bipartisan support for this. What we're seeing are some tweaks to that budget. What we already know are teachers are going to get over a 6% pay increase, 5th consecutive pay increase that teachers will get. There will be 15% of the revenue over last year, the surplus revenue over last year, automatically goes into savings, again, for the pensions and those kind of things, rainy day funds. I mean, that's good fiscal management. So, this whole notion of, we don't know what they're going to have in the budget, it's all done behind closed doors. You're paying attention and you've read last year's budget that has this year's budget in there with these things baked in again. Again, over 6% increase for teacher pay again this year. All those things are already in there.
Pretty soon they might get back to where they were in 2009.
We'll leave it at that. Rob Schofield, Executive Director of NC Policy Watch. Becky Gray, Senior Vice President of the John Locke Foundation. Thank you both.
Thanks, Rusty.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
This is All Things Considered on North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Progressive Insurance with the Name Your Price tool, offering a range of coverage and price options to choose from. Now that's Progressive. More at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. From C3 IoT, providing a software platform that enables organizations to deploy artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, and IoT solutions at industrial scale. Learn more at c3iot.com. From Exact Sciences, offering Cologuard for average-risk adults over 50, a non-invasive colon cancer screening test that can be used at home, by prescription only. Information at cologuardtest.com. And from the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
This is WUNC FM HD1 91.5 Chapel Hill.
Bringing the world home to you, this is North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. I'm Will Michaels. Support comes from the Umstead Hotel and Spa, a hotel surrounded by art and nature. Celebrating Mother's Day with art-inspired gifts, Umstead gift cards, and new spring menus and errands. Information at theumstead.com. And Hanging Rock in Stokes County. The smartphone app is available listing local music venues, restaurants, bars, and more. Additional vacation ideas at hangingrock.com. WUNC's Fort Bragg Stories is a podcast and year-long radio series that looks at life on and around this country's largest military base. You can share your Fort Bragg story at WUNC.org. It's 89 degrees in the Triangle, 91 in Fayetteville, 88 in the Triad, and 78 degrees along the Outer Banks at 5 o'clock. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo meets with his South Korean counterpart. It comes a day after 3 Americans came home from detainment in North Korea. For Friday, May 11th, I'm Will Michaels. This is All Things Considered from North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. The U.S. is preparing for President Trump's upcoming meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which is just more than a month away.
We have the location set, and we will see if we can do something that people did not think was going to happen.
An NPR analysis shows a broad effort by a Russian official to make ties with the American conservative movement as far back as 2009. And residents of Washington state are divided over a plan from the Interior Department to reintroduce the grizzly bear between Seattle and the Canadian border. Plus, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein talks to graduates at Campbell Law School. First, this news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. President Trump says he's fulfilling his long-standing promise to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Speaking at the White House today, Trump unveiled his plan to help Americans pay for their medications.
We're also increasing competition and reducing regulatory burdens so drugs can be gotten to the market quicker and cheaper. We're very much eliminating the middlemen. The middlemen became very, very rich.
He did not mention allowing Medicare to negotiate directly with drug makers. Trump has repeatedly blasted pharmaceutical companies for the high cost of drugs, but today's remarks were the first to address policy. The head of AT&T says it was a big mistake to hire President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, as a political consultant. NPR's Peter Overby reports AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson also announced the retirement of the company's top man in Washington.
Michael Cohen was Trump's lawyer and fixer. He's now under federal investigation. After Trump was elected, AT&T and some other companies hired Cohen. AT&T paid him $600,000. Cohen was soliciting business as a Trump insider who could help companies make connections in the new administration. That kind of so-called strategic advice isn't covered by the laws on lobbying. Stevenson told AT&T employees in a memo that hiring Cohen was a serious misjudgment. He said a top priority now is to make sure AT&T hires consultants with high standards and who, quote, we would be proud to have associated with AT&T. The company's chief counsel is taking charge of the Washington office. Peter Overby, NPR News, Washington.
International health officials say they're concerned about a White House decision to eliminate the Office of Global Health Security. NPR's Jason Beaubien reports a restructuring of the National Security Council led to the decision.
Ever since John Bolton took over as President Trump's national security advisor last month, he's been shaking up the National Security Council. The latest move has been to eliminate the Office of Global Health Security. This week, Rear Admiral Tim Ziemer, who headed that office, left the council. Ziemer's departure came just a day after the Democratic Republic of Congo confirmed that it's scrambling to contain a new Ebola outbreak. The reshuffle of the NSC means that there's no longer a single point person in the administration to deal with a potential national health emergency, an Ebola outbreak, a bioterror attack, or some other health threat here in the U.S. Representative Ami Bera tweeted that Ziemer's departure is deeply alarming, particularly in the context of proposed funding cuts to other pandemic preparedness programs. Jason Beaubien, NPR News.
Stocks closed mixed today on Wall Street. The Dow was up 91 points, the Nasdaq down 2, the S&P up 4. This is NPR.
It's 5:04. Good evening, I'm Will Michaels. This is news from North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. Investigators in Mooresville are still searching for a man who ran while jurors were deliberating in his trial for alleged child sex crimes. Sean Walters was arrested last year on 14 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. After jury deliberations started, Walters requested to go to the bathroom and never returned to the courtroom. Federal authorities are working with local police to find him. The coffee shop Joe Van Gogh has cut ties with Duke University. In a statement today, owner Robbie Roberts said he was doing so to, quote, preserve Joe Van Gogh's brand independence without conditions. Earlier this week, IndieWeek reported that a Duke University administrator complained about a rap song being played in the coffee shop on campus. It eventually led to 2 Joe Van Gogh employees being fired. Roberts says those 2 employees and the others who worked on Duke's campus have been offered new positions at other stores. An embattled member of the U.S. Justice Department addressed Campbell University Law School graduates in Raleigh today. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein told the gathering of new lawyers to never compromise their personal integrity.
As Thomas Jefferson famously said, on matters of style, swim with the current. On matters of principle, stand like a rock.
Rosenstein has come under frequent attack from President Trump during the special counsel's investigation of possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, and his firing is a frequent subject of media speculation. A Harvard Law School graduate, Rosenstein assumed oversight of the investigation when U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself because of his own contacts with Russian officials. Mostly sunny this afternoon, then partly cloudy tonight with lows in the mid-60s. More sunshine tomorrow with slight chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms. Highs in the low 90s in central North Carolina, the mid-80s along the Outer Banks. This is WUNC. Support comes from Sony Pictures Classics presenting The Rider, a new film by Chloe Zhao about a young rodeo cowboy who finds inspiration and redemption while creating a new life after suffering a bronco riding accident. Now playing. And The Fresh Market, providing curated ingredients, gifts, and meal ideas for Mother's Day, including USDA prime filet mignon, prepared side dishes, and fresh floral bouquets. TheFreshMarket.com.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Audie Cornish.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. We are closing out a dramatic week for diplomacy in Asia. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo went to Pyongyang, picked up 3 American prisoners, and brought them back to the U.S., thus setting the stage for President Trump's summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Pompeo says if North Korea chooses to give up its nuclear weapons, it could have a future brimming with peace and prosperity.
If North Korea takes bold action to quickly denuclearize, the United States is prepared to work with North Korea to achieve prosperity on the par with our South Korean friends.
Pompeo was speaking alongside his South Korean counterpart at the State Department today, which is where we find NPR's Michelle Kellerman. Hey, Michelle.
Hi there.
Hey, so before we talk South Korea, start with this latest Pyongyang trip that Pompeo's made. It's the second time this spring he's flown to meet Kim Jong-un. Did he talk today about that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, he spent more time with Kim Jong-un than any other U.S. official for sure, and he used words like warm and substantive, which was a bit surprising coming from this, tough-talking former congressman and CIA director. And he also says he told Kim that the U.S. and North Korea don't have to be enemies forever.
We talked about the fact that America has often in history had adversaries who we are now close partners with, and our hope that we could achieve the same with respect to North Korea.
So Pompeo says he thinks that he has a pretty good understanding with Kim about what the mutual objectives are. He says they talked about the decision that Kim has before him. Is he prepared to give up nuclear weapons in exchange for the kind of assurances that the U.S. is ready to provide?
All right, to the South Korean foreign minister's visit here today. What's he doing here? What message has he brought to Washington?
It's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, and she talked about the need for airtight coordination between the U.S. and South Korea. She says there can't be any daylight on this topic, in particular the presence of U.S. forces in her country. Let's take a listen to that.
Any issue of the alliance, including the troop presence in our country, is a matter for our two allies to discuss and not to be put on the table with North Korea.
And Kang also says that North Korea shouldn't expect any sanctions relief until it takes visible steps to denuclearize. Now, she was here, by the way, also to plan for her president's trip to Washington later this month.
All right, and I apologize for assuming it was a he and not a she. Thank you for the correction. Talk to me a little bit about the plans for the Trump summit. As we've said, it's set for June 12th, so a month and a day from now. What is each side looking for in the run-up to those talks?
Well, at least for the U.S., it's, really a deal, what Pompeo said, like none other before it. It would be a complete denuclearization with a robust verification program. He calls it a big undertaking, but he said he thinks Kim has a good understanding of what the U.S. means by all of that. Of course, that's what we're hearing from the U.S. side. We don't hear those same kind of words from North Korea, so we'll have to see what they're ready to undertake here.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
That's NPR's Michelle Kellerman reporting from the State Department.
We're going to turn now to Ambassador Joseph Yun. Until a couple of months ago, he was the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea policy. He was also the last person to have met the 3 Americans detained in North America who returned to the U.S. just this week. Now he's senior advisor for the Asia Group Consulting Firm. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
I want to tackle a question we just heard from our reporter. The U.S. wants North Korea to completely denuclearize. Do we have any idea what North Korea thinks that means? What's the sort of disconnect maybe that might be coming up?
Well, I think disconnect is a good word. I think there is a gap between what North Korea is prepared to do and what United States wants them to do. We must remember that this is a beginning of a process. This is really the first time that the two countries are engaging for many, many years. So I think to expect big results, immediate results from denuclearization, really setting the bar too high. I would hope that when the two leaders meet in Singapore on June 12th, they would come out with some broad agreement and few concrete steps in the process, and perhaps maybe even, for example, to get together again in 6 months or so to review the progress. So let's not have undue expectations. And, because if you have too big expectations, that really is setting it for failure.
Now, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice spoke at Stanford today, and she had this advice for President Trump.
Mr. President, don't try to make the deal at the table yourself. I know you're a great deal maker, but don't make a deal with Kim Jong-un. Let Mike Pompeo and the experts make the deal, have the photo op, declare peace, and then let somebody else negotiate it.
Ambassador, is that the right approach?
Well, I would agree with that. I mean, of course, I do know that President Trump has followed this issue very closely, and so it's not surprising or many of us who worked in the administration that he wants a deal. More than that, I think he wants to meet with Kim Jong-un and really talk this out. So I wouldn't go as far as the contours of a deal, but again, let's not rush into it because the other side also and from what I've seen, for example, the other side is sending signals that they want something like synchronized actions and that it should be a step-by-step process.
So synchronized action meaning we make one step towards denuclearization and then maybe the U.S. has to do something in the way of sanctions?
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Repeating what we have done in the past. But some things, you know, we may have failed. They have failed in the past. But that's not a reason in itself to try a similar process again.
What do you make of critics who say that North Korea could be using this essentially to stall while they covertly continue with their nuclear program?
That's an interesting question. There are really, I would say, two opposing views on why North Korea is doing this. One is that what you have stated precisely. The other one is that they are looking for a change. And to some extent that could be true. They have tried and they have actually reached the point where they do have nuclear weapons and they do have delivery mechanisms. So to that extent, they have gotten what they want, they feel more confident, and now they feel they can look for something else, which may be, as Kim Jong-un has said, better economy, better standard of living, and that is a hypothesis worth testing. But is he ultimately prepared to give up all nuclear weapons permanently? I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows, and I don't think he would do that until he feels he's ready and he's comfortable, and I don't think he's there yet.
Just a short time left. Any effects from the Iran deal and the U.S. backing out of that? Some people have talked about it being a shadow of the North Korea talks.
I don't agree with that. I mean, certainly when I have talked with North Koreans, they've never mentioned Iran deal. I mean, let's take an example. The Iran deal contained, JCPOA contained over 1,000 pages. The last major agreement we reached with North Korea, and that was what, 2005 six-party talks, was a page and a half. So we're not going to get into the level of details that involved Iran deal, JCPOA. So we're not there yet.
And I'm going to have to leave it there. My apologies, Ambassador Joseph Young. He's a former U.S. Special Representative for North Korea. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second largest office of the U.S. government after the Pentagon is the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA is charged with caring for the 20 million vets in the U.S. It has got a nearly $200 billion budget. More than 360,000 people work there, and the VA has been without a secretary since March. President Trump's recent nominee to lead the agency withdrew under a barrage of misconduct allegations. Now, as NPR's Quill Lawrence reports, the White House has several potential nominees.
The latest possibility is Congressman Brian Mast, a first-term Florida Republican. Mast told NPR that he's honored to be under consideration. He's a decorated Army veteran who lost both his legs in the explosion in Afghanistan. As a congressman, he set up an office for his constituents inside the West Point of the VA. But Mast is only 37, and he's never managed an organization anywhere near the size of the VA. President Trump, on a recent call into Fox News, said he had a candidate in mind.
I do, actually, but I better not give it. Maybe we'll do it on my next call. I do. I think we're going to have somebody great.
All right.
Somebody that's more, look, the Admiral is not a politician, which is what I like.
Is your nominee somebody in politics right now?
Somebody with political capability.
Not only is VA the largest healthcare network in the country, it's subject to constant scrutiny by Congress, and it's been caught up in the heated debate over government-run healthcare. Trump's first VA secretary was Dr. David Shulkin, fired in March. Shulkin had been stung by charges of inappropriate spending, but he had also been targeted by other Trump political appointees who wanted Shulkin to be more aggressive on privatizing VA healthcare. Trump's nominee to replace Shulkin, White House doctor and Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, had never managed a large organization, but it was a raft of misconduct allegations that sank him. Other possibilities are former Congressman Jeff Miller, who led the House Veterans Affairs Committee, as well as several high-profile health executives. But with the politics and the formidable challenge of running the place, the VA has chewed through its past three leaders, says Sherman Gillums with the organization AMVETS.
You've got a four-star Army general who was followed by a multinational corporation executive followed by a doctor who ran healthcare systems, all who held that position, and in some way, shape, or form, it didn't turn out well.
Gillums adds that this White House could easily name someone completely unknown and unexpected. In the meantime, Acting Secretary Robert Wilkie is also rumored to be in the running for the job. He's a Pentagon official, and he's been pushing hard for Congress to pass several important VA reforms even before VA has a new secretary. Bill Lawrence, NPR News.
This is NPR.
An NPR analysis shows a broad effort by a Russian official to make ties with the American conservative movement as far back as 2009. We'll have a report in 15 minutes on WUNC. Support comes from St. Mary's School in Raleigh, educating girls grades 9 through 12, welcoming prospective day and boarding students for campus visits. More at sms.edu. And bioMeriU, promoting sepsis awareness to individuals and hospitals nationwide. Information about patient statistics and monitoring, early detection, and treatment at talkingsepsis.com.
Back in the day, when you reached into a bowl of pistachios, it was really U.S.-Iranian relations in snack form.
Iran was sending a tremendous amount of their product here to the United States.
I'm Kai Rizdal. Little green nuts and bilateral trade next time on Marketplace.
That's tonight at 6:30 after All Things Considered. We also get support from the Gotta Be NC Festival, May 18th through 20th at the NC State Fairgrounds, featuring local food, music, farm animals, carnival rides, and more. GottaBeNCFestival.com. Thanks so much to everyone who helped to make WUNC's spring fundraiser a great success. Listener support continues to be the single largest and most reliable source of funding for North Carolina Public Radio, so your help is key to WUNC's success. Again, thank you so much. Partly cloudy tonight with lows in the mid-60s, more sunshine tomorrow, a slight chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms, highs in the low 90s. It's 5:20.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Indeed, used by over 3 million businesses for hiring, where employers can post jobs and use screener questions to build their shortlist of preferred candidates. Learn more at Indeed.com/hire. From Farmers Insurance, committed to helping people understand the ins and outs of insurance so they can prepare for life's ups and downs. Coverage options and more information can be found at farmers.com. And from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Audie Cornish. Grizzly bears may be on their way back to rural Washington state. The Trump administration is thinking about reintroducing the predators just south of the Canadian border and about 100 miles north of Seattle. And rural farmers and ranchers are gearing up for a fight. During a reporting trip there, NPR's Kirk Siegler discovered the looming battle is about a lot more than grizzly bears.
This is a story about reintroducing a grizzly bear to a state where they were eradicated years ago. But it's also about something a lot bigger. Listen to these two polar opposite views of grizzlies to understand why.
Sheer inspiration and wonder. That's what grizzly bears do for people.
This is environmentalist Joe Scott, who lives in Bellingham, Washington, north of Seattle. Next is Jim Detro, who lives on the more rural east side of the Cascade Mountains.
I can run out on my back porch and scream and scare the hell out of a black bear. You're not going to do that with a grizzly bear.
They'll hunt you down, he says. Playing out in these two vastly different views of the same bear is the country's urban-rural divide, or at least a version of it. But first, let's start in Jim Detro's hometown, remote Okanagan, Washington. He's a county commissioner here. And in his office, there are stuffed cougars, bighorn sheep, and deer he's hunted mounted on the walls. In a shoebox he keeps in his desk drawer, there's also a giant mold of a bear claw.
There you go. But that's a Buster Bear's calf stuff. That Tongue Creek grizzly.
The Tongue Creek grizzly, an infamous grizz that he says terrorized this area in 1958.
They hunted that bear. Nobody ever got him. He was just on a rampage through here killing livestock and eventually left them.
But Detro is worried that if the feds reintroduce the bears, there will be more economic havoc in this river-cut valley with its cattle, but also its lucrative fruit orchards and tourism and vacation home industries. He says grizzly reintroduction to Washington state is being pushed by deep-pocketed environmentalists on the other side of the Cascades in Seattle.
They have this grandiose idea that there's this vast wilderness out there that's part of theirs because it's public land that they can go to. But we that live here don't have a right to live here.
Ditro says people in cities like to cut checks for feel-good environmental causes, but they're not the ones who actually live out here, off the land, have to deal with the consequences.
Well, a friend of mine that's a rancher coined the phrase asphalite. You know what that is? That's a person that is born and raised on concrete and asphalt, has no common sense whatsoever, and gets up every single morning and drinks the green Kool-Aid.
It can feel like two parallel universes when you travel from rural Okanagan County over the mountains to the more well-heeled Seattle area. It's a place famous for its liberal activism and Patagonia-clad population that flocks to the Cascades to backcountry ski or hike.
People in urban areas do spend a lot of time in places where the bears will be.
Joe Scott, the environmentalist we heard from earlier, is showing me the edge of what would be the grizzly bear recovery zone in the Mount Baker Snow Quality National Forest.
And it gives you a little preview into what's in the backcountry. You can see steep mountains and heavy snows in the background.
Scott takes offense to the argument that people who live in more urban places are somehow disconnected from these wild areas. He's skied, camped, and bushwhacked his way through these rugged mountains, and he says there's plenty of room for a couple hundred grizzlies.
Grizzly bears are not man-eaters.
Scott says grizzlies avoid humans unless we give them a reason to be a nuisance, like when we leave trash out. And in states to the east of here that have grizzlies, like around Yellowstone or Glacier Parks, problem bears tend to get dealt with swiftly.
You know, we hear a lot from people that this is just another federal intrusion to push an urban agenda. Well, first of all, the federal government is following the law.
Federal law says a species at the brink of extinction must be protected. Now, the environmentalists got to go to the invite-only announcement by President Trump's Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke that the grizzly clan was being restarted. Over on the other side of the urban-rural divide, on the eastern slopes of the Cascades, people told me they weren't invited and felt blindsided. They thought this Obama-era plan was dead.
What the hell we do? You know, we thought we had somebody on our side, and now Zinke pulls this on us? We're not happy.
This is Craig Veraska, a rancher and enthusiastic Trump supporter. He grew up with Jim Ditro, the county commissioner who showed me that bear claw print earlier. We're out in one of his pastures where his cows spent the winter.
They think because I stop with the trailer, they think I'm going to come feed them, you know.
And once the snow melts up high, he'll move these cows up into the lush Cascades where they'll graze for the summer near where the grizzlies would be reintroduced. He thinks they'll kill his cows, or at the very least keep them stressed and moving, not breeding. Now, Veraska is so frustrated because he says Secretary Zinke had pledged to better listen to rural voices like his when it comes to public lands decisions.
I mean, the guy flies to the Northwest in a 48-hour period and makes a decision like that, to my knowledge, not consulting a person like myself who spent a lifetime here.
A Zinke spokeswoman declined an interview request by NPR. But the secretary has said he, quote, supports the great bear, and in particular its cultural significance to area tribes. And here's where that urban-rural divide issue, how it relates to the grizzly bear debate, gets complicated. It's clear not everyone in a city or everyone in a rural area fits neatly on one side of this divide or the other.
In my language, we say blimlimp, pullin shootin', blimlimp smum in, blimlimp snock silu.
Before I left rural Okanagan, I met Lori Sue Nelson. She's speaking in her native Salish. Nelson is a descendant of the Colville tribes of central Washington. They consider the grizzly sacred and want to see it brought back.
They have the right to be here before any other species because they were indigenous to this area since the beginning of time.
The final decision on grizzly reintroduction is expected by the end of the year. Kirk Sigler, NPR News, Okanagan, Washington.
Person who has sold 75 million records for you.
Oh, don't you think it's time
If you're RCA Records in 1961 and the person is Elvis Presley, you get him a watch. And not just any ordinary watch, but an Omega watch decorated with 44 cut diamonds.
And on the back, there's an engraving that says, to Elvis, 75 million records, RCA Victor, December 25th, 1960.
That's Alex Gottby reading the date Elvis Presley hit that 75 million sales mark.
Gottby is head of sales for Philips Watches in Geneva, which is auctioning off Elvis's watch tomorrow. Now, how the watch got into their hands is quite a story. Gottby says the king was fond of his watch, but, sentiment only goes so far.
One day, Elvis was in Las Vegas at a casino, and some chap comes up to them and sits next to him at the table. Elvis looks at his latest wrist, compliment on his watch. The man in question also compliments Elvis on this watch which he's wearing. This is this Omega retailed by Tiffany & Co. And Elvis suggests that they trade watches, which they did.
Gottby says Hamilton watch in exchange. Now, the heirs of the man who got the Omega are the ones selling it off at auction.
The auction house estimates Elvis Presley's watch could fetch $50,000 to $100,000 tomorrow.
More churches in North Carolina have given sanctuary to immigrants who are living in the country illegally. We'll hear that story in 15 minutes on WUNC.
Gina Haspel's confirmation vote to head the CIA is scheduled for early next week. I'm Eric Hodge. We'll preview the vote, plus members of the General Assembly return to Raleigh for the short session, Monday on Morning Edition.
Start your day with WUNC. Support comes from Our American Story, a student contest for 8th through 12th graders designed to foster creativity and discussion among the next generation. AmericanEvolution2019.com/Our American Story. And the Sorgi Insurance Agency, an Erie insurance provider committed to providing personalized insurance advice for home, auto, and business since 1954. Offering new driver orientation and customized insurance advice. Details, SorgiInsurance.com. And North Carolina Arts Council presenting the North Carolina Heritage Awards. The 6 of North Carolina's traditional artists, Wednesday, May 23rd in Raleigh. Tickets, ncarts.org. Bringing the world home to you, this is North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. It's 89 degrees in the Triangle, 91 in Fayetteville, 88 in the Triad, and 78 degrees along the Outer Banks at 5:30.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. Trump administration officials say they expect about 800 guests for a ceremony Monday opening the U.S. Embassy in Israel in Jerusalem. Paris Michelle reports the ambassador of a small team will be moving into an existing U.S. consulate.
Ambassador Jake Friedman and top aides will start working in Jerusalem next week. Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan is leading a U.S. delegation that will also include President Trump's daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner. Officials say they don't expect any members of the U.S. delegation to meet Palestinians during their visit. They also say they believe the embassy move will improve chances of peace. The State Department is changing the U.S. government maps to put a star by Jerusalem, endorsing Israel's claim to the city as its capital. Palestinians are seeking a state with East Jerusalem as its capital. U.S. officials insist the boundaries of the city are still up for negotiation. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
President Trump met with leaders of the world's top automakers at the White House today and told them he wants to see more cars built here in the U.S. The meeting comes as his administration weighs plans to reduce gas mileage and pollution standards enacted during the Obama administration. Trump calls it a reverse act.
We want them to build more cars in the United States and also build them here and ship them overseas. We're doing a reverse act. And that's going to be something I think that's happening, and we see it happening. A lot of it has to do with the great tax cuts and tax incentives that people have been given. And we have other incentives coming.
Trump has also been pushing his administration to redo the trade deal with Mexico and Canada, which he says he's not a fan of. The auto industry is watching wearily because of the amount of business done in both of those countries. Stocks finished mixed on Wall Street. The Dow rose 91 points. This is NPR News.
It's 5:33. Good evening, I'm Will Michaels. This is news from North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. The state Supreme Court will not set aside a ruling against an environmental advocacy group. The court said NC Warren unlawfully acted as a public utility by selling solar power to a church in Greensboro. The court heard oral arguments last month and issued its ruling today. The group installed solar panels on a church roof and sold electricity to the church at rates that were below those set by utility monopoly Duke Energy. Campbell Law School held its commencement ceremony in Raleigh today, and as Rusty Jacobs reports, the featured speaker was an embattled official with the U.S. Justice Department.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein cited the words of the nation's forefathers in his speech. The Harvard Law School graduate quoted John Adams in reminding the new lawyers that facts are stubborn things.
Pursuing